welcome to our next Bible study from a seer's perspective. Today we're going to look at Job chapter 21, which is Job's response to Zophar's words to him regarding the wicked and what they will receive. And Job's response is kind of the other point of view, and he unpacks a lot of things for us, such as the question of why does God allow the wicked to thrive on the earth? Why doesn't he punish them? Why doesn't he visit wickedness and say, put an end to it? So we're going to look at that. We're also going to look at the rule of God's justice and God's grace and what they actually are. So let's begin by jumping straight into verse 2. Job says, "Listen carefully to my words. Let this be the consolation you give me. Bear with me while I speak, and after I have spoken, mock on." Job, his heart is crying out, saying, "You've spoken all these words, but listen to my words. Let this be the consolation you give me." And so Job is actually saying, listen to what my heart needs at this time. He's saying, you have looked with your own wisdom, you've looked with your own eyes and perceived what you think is happening, and you've said what you think is best to say. And he's saying, actually, I just need you to listen. Listen to my heart. Listen to what's going on here. And he's saying, put yourself in my shoes. And this is really the heart of the seer gifting. The heart of seeing into the spiritual realm is what Jesus was able to do, was to see beyond what the natural eyes see, to see into the hearts of people, and to be able to administer the grace of God to them and the justice of God to them. Now, I'm going to mention a little bit about that before we move on. So one example is the woman who was caught in adultery. The Pharisees and the religious people brought her to Jesus. They probably set her up, if you look into the history and read around the context of that. And they bring this lady to Jesus, and Jesus doesn't say a word, and they throw all these accusations at her. Jesus knows every single person's heart there. Now, he writes things in the sand, and as he's writing these things in the sand, these religious people turn away one by one and walk away. And then he stands up and says, basically, let him who's sinned throw the first stone. And no one is able to throw a stone because they've all got sin. And then he restores this lady. So here we have the grace of God. He basically says, look, all of you have a problem. Your problem is your disconnection from God. You don't understand the heart of God. You don't understand his grace. You don't understand his love. If you did, then you'd be acting differently. You would restore this woman instead of accusing her. And this woman, Jesus, restores her. So we have the grace of God, which basically says, I do not condemn you. And then the justice of God, which says, your life basically has been ruined. It's a wreck. Your world is a ruin. It's a wreck. And I'm coming to restore it to the original design that I intended for you. And this is the justice of God. It sees the world. It sees our lives. It sees everything in creation that has gone wrong. And it says, I want to give you something that's going to restore you. And that is my Holy Spirit. It is my love. It is my redeeming grace, so that in eternity you can come and enter eternity and enter perfection. And basically when God does away with this order of things, this world, this way that we currently live in, and he restores all things, he brings things into the new order, into his perfection. He brings us into that as well, and takes us from the position we're at now into the position we're supposed to be. So this is the heart of the seer, is to actually say, God, what is the design from my friends, the design for the people around me, for the situations around me? What is your intention and your design? And I'm going to respond or speak or act towards these people and situations as if they are in that design. So I'm going to treat them in the highest order, in God's order. I'm going to treat them as God sees them. It's very challenging to do, but that is really the heart of the seeing gift. It is able to see and perceive how God sees and perceives in a very spiritual way. and then it's able to speak out or to behave in response to that, instead of reacting or responding to what our natural eyes see or we think is right or what we perceive someone needs. So let's go on through this. So verse 6, Job starts saying that when he thinks about this, which is what he's about to unpack for us, he is terrified. Trembling seizes his body. He says, "Why do the wicked live on, growing old and increasing in power?" And he goes on, and basically he describes the wicked people, those who hate God, those who do evil. So these are people who are like consciously doing evil. They're consciously crooked. They don't want anything to do with what's right. They're living on, they're prospering in the land, everything is going well for them, their children are multiplying, everything is well for their children, and they're gaining power and respect in the land. And Job is terrified at this. His body is trembling. This could be a trembling due to anger or shock at this reality. It's almost like a spiritual cognitive dissonance, where the wisdom that Zophar has presented says that the wicked will get their reward for their wickedness. Job is saying, actually, if you look around, doesn't seem that way. So what is going on? There is this spiritual dissonance where we believe something should happen and we look and we see it's not happening. And that's because wisdom really has two sides. As we saw in an earlier look in one of the earlier chapters of Job, one side of wisdom says that the wicked do get their reward. But you have to understand that in the context of grace and justice, and we looked at that in the previous Bible study, we see that reward actually comes in the end. And then wisdom has another side for this situation of wickedness that says actually God's grace and justice says everyone's in the same boat here. Whether you decide to be wicked or you decide to be good, you're all in the same boat together. Now God's grace says you're all going to live on this earth in ways which you choose to do. And God gave this choice to the Israelites. He said, he laid out his law to them. He laid out the ways of the kingdom, the perfect way to live, basically. And he basically said, you choose. If you do right, a blessing will come. If you do wrong or this wickedness, a curse will come. And he said, you choose. But he said, but I highly recommend you to choose life, choose the blessing. So he knows what we need. He knows what will give us life, what will give us blessing, and he doesn't think about the here and now only. He thinks about eternity and the age to come. So God's perspective is much bigger than our own, whereas our perspective is very narrow. And so the rule of grace and justice says, yes, okay, right now everybody, whether you're wicked or not wicked, whether you're pursuing God or not pursuing his ways, everybody lives life, and this life has, the rules of physics which govern us, the causality govern us. There's a cause and effect for everything. You can kind of, bad things happen to good people, good things happen to bad people. It's the world we live in, and there is not this sort of divine retribution at play here. It's just, this is nature at work. The rules of nature that God has designed governing over us. And God says, hey, I've got an eternal perspective. Now, this wisdom says there is grace ruling over us at this time, that God allows us to live these lives as we want to. But there is an eternal perspective we need to hold that says, actually, there's consequences for how we live now. So if you want rewards into eternity, then consider Jesus, consider what his death and resurrection mean for us. And consider your life here. What kind of thing are you building in the spiritual realms with your life? What kind of rewards are you going to get for your behavior, your attitude, your heart intent? What is that going to reap for you? And you're, going on into eternity. What are you really going to get out of that? So that's the side of wisdom which is eternal, and the side of wisdom which is not eternal. It's temporal. It says, there's grace to allow the wicked to thrive, to allow the righteous to thrive, or to allow the righteous to suffer or the wicked to suffer. It's basically life. That's what this is kind of boiling down to. And then it says, in verses 14 to 16, it goes on and says about their attitude towards God. These wicked people, they basically say to God, leave us alone. We don't want to know you. We have no desire for your ways. For us, they don't seem to be prosperous. We see no benefit in that. We are happy to live as we are. We gain nothing by praying to God. We've built all this with our own hands. We don't need God, is what they say. And basically God still allows them to live on with that attitude. And it's a very interesting thing to see the rule of grace. And this is God's grace, where he says, okay, I love you enough to let you live your life as you want to. You choose me or you don't choose me, but I'm going to let you live your life. And some people, their lives aren't so long as other people's lives. And some people have calamity come to them and some people don't. And what this passage is saying is, it's not because of a divine retribution that's happening, or vindication, or avenging, or anything like that. It is life. And Jesus touches on this when he's asked by people, when a tower fell over in his time and crushed a lot of people, these people said, Jesus, was that because they sinned and God was punishing them? And Jesus says it's not because of their sin or their father's sin or the generations before them. Stuff happens. And sometimes it's bad stuff. And it's kind of, Jesus is encouraging those people to shift out of this mindset of, if you are righteous, you're going to really live a great, fantastic life right now. Because it's not necessarily the case. Or to shift out of the mindset that says, if you've got a really bad life, it's because you must have done something really bad. Or if things are going really wrong for you, you must not have your life quite right with God. And I see this a lot in church, actually. And you know, it's just, sometimes life is life. Sometimes bad things happen, sometimes good things happen. It's a roller coaster. And this is the strange thing. It kind of breaks our desire to put God into a box and say there are rules. For good, there's good. For bad, there's bad. Actually, it's a lot more complex than that and a lot more messy. So let's go on and talk about God. And what happens, it says, can anyone teach knowledge to God, since he judges even the highest? So basically, God in his ultimate wisdom has allowed this complex nature to rule over us, this complexity of saying there is no rhyme or reason for good or bad happening to people. It just happens. Now, sometimes there is divine intervention, and we see that throughout the Bible, but often it's for a reason. Otherwise, we're just left to our own means and keep going and allowed to make choices of whether we pursue God or not. And God's, in his knowledge, has actually decided to set up this thing at the end of time, where rewards are given for what we've done here on earth, for our thoughts, our behaviors, our attitudes, and how we've treated each other, and how we've treated the planet. So basically everything God is going to bring into his divine end of time. And there will be rewards given out and consequences, I expect. But who am I? I don't know to think this. We've always got to weigh everything up with what the Bible has given us. And a lot of it is still very mysterious. But we know for sure that there is an end. Jesus is there. And there is a reward given for good deeds, for righteous ways, for those who've pursued Jesus. And God rewards faith. So there's rewards given for faith as well. This is a wonderful thing to contemplate. So basically, the ultimate end is at the end. So there are several things at play here. The first is two sides of wisdom. There's the eternal wisdom and the temporal wisdom. Eternal wisdom says, I'm going to look at the bigger picture and get God's point of view on this. And that's what we're called to do. Go higher, see God's point of view, understand the mind of Christ, understand the wisdom of God. The next thing is grace. Understand that God has grace for everybody on the earth now. He desires everything to come into his order, into his design, into connection with him. And he is waiting patiently for the fulfillment of that. He's waiting for the fulfillment of time when he says, okay, enough is enough, and now I'm going to bring the end. He's got grace for us now. He's patiently waiting, patiently foregoing a lot of stuff that's happening on the earth. And then there is restorative justice, or redemptive justice, that says, I see the mess that's happened here, and I want to redeem everything back into the order that I designed for it. And this is God's justice. Look at the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He saw that actually the spiritual realms, the earthly realms, humanity, we all needed redemption. Everything needed to be restored. It had gone astray, it had gone a mess, things were crazy, and in the spiritual realms, things had gone really kind of all wrong. And God said, this is not good for my creation, it's not good for my people, it's not good for the connection of humanity to me. So instead of like destroying it and wiping it all out, I'm going to set things right through my son, Jesus Christ. I'm going to bring grace. I'm not going to condemn anybody, but I'm going to bring that grace. I'm going to bring that mercy. And this is his justice. It actually says that you are forgiven, you're redeemed, you're restored into the identity that God has designed for you. And this is the call of the seer, is to see what God is intending to do, what God has intended in his design for the situations around us, and to begin calling that into being prophetically. Begin to call things as God sees them, to call things as if they are not what they are. So we see things as they are not. And that is the very nature of faith. It is to believe in things that are not yet here. And it's the same with how God sees things. He may see them in a very different light to how they appear to us. And we're called to see them as he sees them. So let this really bless you. And I just really pray that you have your spiritual eyes opened to see the deeper into God, deeper into his ways, deeper into his love, his mercy, his kindness, his beauty, and to be able to see things from his perspective and to begin calling things as God calls them. So may you be blessed, and I look forward to you joining us in our next Bible study. If you like this video and would like more mentoring or teaching materials on the biblical perspective of these spiritual gifts, why don't you join me on my Patreon? It's www.patreon.com/Christian Seer. If you like this video, please give me a like below, subscribe and follow, and leave a comment below. Let me know if you have any questions, any thoughts. I love to hear from you, and I look forward to you joining me for the next video, which will be coming soon.